very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you again, Councilmember Sims, and all of you for welcoming me, and thanks to the public. All of you are paying attention. I appreciate being with you again. I want to give a couple updates tonight. I first want to start just mentioning Dawn Johnsen, who you all know has been in the hospital. She is now home, which is a delight, and we're very relieved for that. She spent 10 nights in Bloomington Hospital. And I actually want to just, on part of my report, actually share a statement from her to the community as part of the mayor's report. And I'll just read that, and then I'll finish my report with a couple other comments. But this is from Dawn. I want to say thank you to the Bloomington community for the encouragement and love expressed to me and our family during the 10 nights I struggled with COVID-19 at Bloomington Hospital. My brother also was hospitalized in Indianapolis during that same time and now is recovering at home in Kokomo. But my 79-year-old mother was not able to win her battle with COVID, and we lost her last Thursday. In addition to saying thank you for the support, I would like to share a few thoughts from that difficult experience. My brother and I, and countless others, would not be alive today if it were not for the willingness of nurses, doctors, and other healthcare providers to risk their health and very lives. I was painfully conscious and deeply grateful for their sacrifice each time they put on protective gear to enter my isolation room to care for me, including days I struggled mightily to breathe. I understand more profoundly than before that if we do not take seriously the threat of COVID and physically distance and follow sensible public guidelines, we endanger the lives of these dedicated frontline workers, as well as their children, grandchildren, and parents who share their homes. It is our moral obligation. I also want to say that it is terribly dangerous and an outrage that President Trump and others are encouraging insane theories that COVID is somehow a hoax, or that certain local and state governments are implicated somehow. COVID has already killed my mother and 175,000 or so others. Our success at overcoming this health emergency and global pandemic depends on us sticking together, following health experts and science, and not allowing cynical political ploys or games to divert us from our duties. Thank you again to the whole community, and let's stay the course together. That's from Dawn Johnsen, and I appreciate you letting me share that and for all the support we've gotten. It is true that healthcare workers saved her life at a risk of their own families, and I do want to repeat that continued physical distancing is key. It is outrageous that some leaders, including our president, are calling for protests against civic authorities and rebellions against stay-at-home orders and such. That's a dangerous, deadly, and despicable game. And I want to report that we are unified here in Bloomington, and I appreciate that from the leadership to support the continued listening to health experts and doing the right thing with the physical distancing. I'll just briefly report as well, and I do want to thank the city and the members of our community for continuing to adopt and embrace the protections that are so important. We continue to work. The continuity of city government meets weekly, and as you know, we're continuing to provide services. I'll thank again all of our employees who work for us, making services continue. The UDO, Unified Development Ordinance, has been approved and signed. We're continuing work. Switchyard apartments, 8 new affordable apartment units opened with a virtual ribbon cutting last week at the new park. Farmers Market continues. Nearly 500 patrons were accommodated efficiently. You see progress on Kirkwood construction and many other projects that are going on. There are some events being canceled. B-Town Boom has been canceled. Taste of Bloomington has been canceled, at least for the scheduled plan. Blackie Brown Festival has been canceled. City Pools, we're trying to understand what the options are for those as we go forward. No decisions made on that. I will add my thanks and recognition of this 50th anniversary of Earth Day, how important it is that we continue to do the good work and give the good energy toward that. I'll just I'll just note it can remind us that that can be quite effective. The first Earth Day in 1970, within 3 years of that first Earth Day, within 3 years, the following had happened. 1, the Environmental Protection Agency was created. 2, the Clean Water Act was passed. 3, the Clean Air Act was passed. And 4, the Endangered Species Act was passed within 3 years of the first Earth Day. Building momentum and building public support toward that is a good thing. It was very powerful then, and we need to keep that kind of momentum. I am happy to take questions at the end of this. I'm going to hand it over, Councilmember Sims, if it's all right, for brief updates from the 2 coordinators of very important external work groups on social services and economic recovery and stabilization and recovery, and Beverly Calender-Anderson and Alex Crowley, if that's okay with you, and then maybe we all can take questions. Thank you.
That is fine with me and all of us. Who shall go first? I see Mr. Crowley.
At your direction.
Okay, let's start with Alex. How are you doing, Mr. Crowley? I'm sorry, Mr. Crowley.
Doing well. Thanks very much, Councilmember Sims. So thanks to everybody for your comments, and to Mayor Hamilton for Dawn's very moving statement. I'm Alex Crowley. I'm the Director of Economic and Sustainable Development. I'm going to share my screen here so I can take you through a couple of slides of a presentation, give you an update on the work of the Economic Stabilization Recovery Working Group. Give me a second here. So can everybody see that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, so, in the interest of time, I'm going to kind of fly through this. You have a copy of it, and it will be distributed. And so there will be some differences from the last presentation I gave, but we'll just get through this, and then I'll be open to questions at the end. So I want to start by reiterating who the working group is and the tremendous work this group has done, including Pat East, Jane Cooper-Smith, Brian Payne, Jen Pearl, Aaron Predmore, and Sean Starowitz. And I also want to add that Councilmember Scamboluri and County Council Member Kim have been very integral in this, and it's been hugely beneficial to us and to the work. They've really hung in there with us and provided great feedback along the way. So I wanted to draw your attention to their work and thank them for their participation and their knowledge along the way. So this is a chart that you've seen already. I updated it through today. What this is basically in the light blue are the number of people who've gotten on the platform to start applications. The dark blue are the ones who have completed their applications. And then the yellow, which starts up in last week, actually last Thursday, are the ones that we've started to review. So you'll see those numbers here. Again, there's an uptick in activities, especially we did on the 20th and the 22nd. We took a look, and our presumption is that as the monies were starting to run out of the PPP program, which is the federal program, and SBA monies, people started to look elsewhere for potential sources of funding. So that's how we're interpreting those two numbers. This is a snapshot, which is a sort of different view of today. And basically, it looks at everything, all the status levels of each of the applications as they've come in. So what you'll see circled there is that we have awarded and wired and sent for wire 7 awards. So those loans are wired. But each of these different status represent where people are in different areas. So under committee review means that those had been submitted after we started the first batch. So there are 14 of those. Another 4 came in actually after we even issued those 14. So there's an additional 4 in the queue, and we'll get those into review as quickly as possible. We awarded 14. There were sorry, it's hidden in this camera view, but I think it's 122 pending submission. We've turned 1 down along the way because actually that entity was in the county. One entity, and I wanted to actually tip my hat to them, one organization was awarded a loan, and then sort of simultaneously had gotten funding from the federal government. and they came back to us and they appreciated having been awarded the loan, and they suggested that perhaps we could reuse that money for someone else. So I think that was a very honorable thing to do, and appreciate them doing that. And then, as I mentioned, we wired 7 awards, and then there are 8 who have been bumped into a side process, which is more of a kind of review. There was not enough information, so we're going back to them and trying to work them through to hopefully yes on the program. So as you'll see, total applications that have been approved, 22 for a total funding approval of $550,770, of which $449,600 come from the food and beverage tax and $101,170 come from BUEA. Those have been funded, the 7 I mentioned before, total $240,600, all of which has come from the the food and beverage funding source. And the reason for that is we actually have 2 templates, and so we started with the food and beverage one, and the BUEA one is in real time, even as we speak, being approved and issued out. There's an additional, actually 72,000, maybe even a little more, that's in progress right now for wiring instructions, which just happened this afternoon. So just to reiterate, it's a pretty controlled process, and I want to make sure that everybody understands that we're doing this by design. And you'll see here just a process overview. So the applicant, starts and finishes an application. It goes into a financial and impact review committee, which has been stood up by the mayor as part of an executive order to appoint community members and leaders to look at that. We then take all of that input into our department actually and develop a recommendation. And in the case where we have conflict of interest flags, which we're taking very seriously in this case as well, we pursue those. And we also, we also, in the cases of the appeals process, kick those off to a manual process. Following that, we go to funding approval, which involves our department, which is economic sustainable development, but the controller and legal departments are involved in that. Once that's done, there's a whole document creation and signature process, which we start and the applicant finishes, and then final approvals come back to the city, and the 3 departments review them, and then the controller kicks it out to the bank to issue the wires. So there have been some process improvements along the way, and this is important largely because we are, concerned about making sure that this is smooth, and also are interested in making sure that if volumes increase, we've ironed out any issues that have happened along the way. We've added, at the suggestion of the reviewers themselves, some changes to the impact and financial review processes. Probably most important here is that on the financial review, we ask every new applicant to submit a credit report, which is a free credit report. And that really helps a lot to understand what kind of situation we're dealing with. So this is fiscally prudent, and we're really trying to make sure that we smooth out the process and ensure controls in the process. So there are continuing issues to address. This is all moving very quickly, but we have an eye on the following. There's still a drop-off between the applications in progress and those that have been submitted. We need to understand better what the status of the unfinished applications is. That'll give us a sense of what kind of forward-looking volumes we should expect. There are continued challenges reaching underserved businesses via communications. We've done some outreach to try to shore that up, and we'll continue to do that, but that is something that we're keenly aware of. The CARES Act evolves every day, and so trying to keep track of that and make sure we understand the role that we're playing relative to that is an important consideration as we move forward. And then just a challenge that we're facing is that the group that has submitted applications where there's more information needed is just very manually intensive. It must reside at the city because it's dealing with very sensitive information. But that's a process that we're going to have to work out a little bit more. So that's my presentation. I'm going to exit this and open for questions when you're ready.
So I think Beverly, Calender-Anderson.
Thank you. Yes, no, I'm trying to get to my screen. Sorry about that. Ms. Beverly Calender-Anderson.
Thank you, Councilmember Sims. I'm Beverly Calender-Anderson with the Community and Family Resources Department. And the Social Services Working Group is continuing to meet. I think I told you last week or maybe week before that we're meeting in subgroups under the headings or the topics of shelter, food, health and public safety, and child care. And so all of those committees are led by members of that group and have been meeting to find out what the priorities in each one of those areas happen to be. We have gotten initial reports from 3 of the groups, from shelter, child care, and food, continuing to work with the public safety group to get their immediate priorities. Also starting to look a bit into the future about what it's going to look like. So not so much looking for those that have, where we've dealt with some of the immediate needs, looking at what it's going to look like as we continue in the marathon, because we know that some of the results of this are going to be longer term than just the immediate. And we're moving from, I think now, from crisis to emergency. And so we're looking at that, what that's going to mean for staffing, what that's going to mean for volunteers, what that's going to mean for supplies and equipment needs and all of that. The isolation shelter for people experiencing homelessness is up and running. Last week when I spoke with you, they'd had 1 guest. They've had 2 others since then. Actually, I think there is 1 there now. We have a group of us that meet daily just to get an update on the shelter, how many people are there, if there are any needs, and what's going on. And so we have a morning meeting every day that involves the city and the county and the shelter administrators and management, public health. I think that's it. So we are all aware of what's happening with and in the shelter. And if there are any needs, we're able to address them right away and not have to wait 2 or 3 days or weeks. And then we're also continuing to look at data from Helping Bloomington Monroe, again, to see where our residents' priority needs are. And right now, most of what we are seeing is food. That's one of the highest priority areas. So we're going to integrate that information with the information that we're getting from the agency director. So we're looking at it from an agency standpoint as well as from an individual standpoint that way. So that's about what I have today, unless there are any questions.